welcome to Scrushy on Business. Another podcast, another week, another day. Wow, things continue to move. What opportunities we have right now. The stock market's going crazy. I'm telling you, we're seeing some real increases and some opportunities for people to make a lot of money if they're in the right place at the right time. You know, we over the last few weeks, we've changed our platform a little bit. I'm real excited about where we are right now today. We've added a new sponsor. Y'all have heard me talk about it, Brothers Cleaner. Brothers Multipurpose Cleaner and Degreaser. You can go to brotherscleaner.com. You go to info@brotherscleaner.com, and you can order your cleaners. It's an outstanding product. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we haven't answered any questions from our audience lately, and we continue to get emails, and people are asking us questions, and I want to answer a few of those questions before we get into today's subjects. And we are going to talk about some neat stuff today. I want to do a quick review, and then I want to get into a playbook, if you will, for prevention of failure. If you're building a company, some things that you're going to want to know that are going to help you not fail in whatever it is that you are doing, especially if you're in a brand new startup business with a small business, or even if it's going to be a large business. But there's some things that you just need to do, and we're going to talk about those today. But first, let's take a message from Thomas. He's from San Antonio, Texas. He says, I have a small restaurant, and I would like to expand into other locations. I have a good customer base, and I am profitable. Any thoughts or advice that you could give me to help me decide what to do next? Well, you know, we've been talking about restaurant failures, and we went over a lot of restaurants that failed. I mean, I've got a list around here somewhere. I'm going to run through them real quick, just so you'll know. His question is very, very important, because there've been a lot of restaurants that have failed lately. The big chains, Howard Johnson's, Sweet Tomatoes, Garden Fresh Restaurant Buffets, Boston Market, Quiznos, Lone Star Steakhouse has had problems, Ryan's Old Country Buffet, Outback, Bonefish, Carrabba's, Jack in the Box, Noodles and Company, Bahama Breeze, Smoky Bones, Hooters, O'Charlie's, Pizza Hut, Joe's Crab Shack, Luby's, Hardee's, Steak and Shake, Tijuana Flats, Perkins Restaurant and Bakery, Marie Callender's, LePaine, Quotidian, Brios, Bravo, Food First Global owns those companies, Subway, Denny's, Applebee's, Wendy's, Red Robin, Coco's Bakery, Bennigan, Steak and Ale, Red Lobster. Let's see, this keeps on. TGI Fridays, California Pizza Kitchen, Chuck E. Cheese, Ruby Tuesday, BurgerFi. A lot of companies, that's just to name a few, and they're either filed bankruptcy or some of them have closed, or they've had to dramatically shrink the company. So if you're in the restaurant business, you've got a restaurant and it's successful. He says he is currently profitable. Okay, well, praise God. That's great. He's making money. He says he's got a good customer base. You know, I guess in most successful restaurants that I go into where the owner is actually present, he's there. Matter of fact, there's a couple of great restaurants in town where I live here where the owners are there. And matter of fact, if you go in on a Friday night or Saturday night, you usually see the owner. He's right there. He greets you, and he's dressed up nice. He's got on a tie, and he's got his jacket on, and he thanks you for coming in, and he makes sure you get a good seat and takes care of you. And I mean, he's looking after his customer base. Now, that guy makes money. And those are nice restaurants, by the way. They're high end. They're not small restaurants. They're not let's say buffets or, just anything. I mean, they serve nice steaks. They got great appetizers. They have really nice bar they have some super drinks. You can get a nice margarita. You can get a nice cocktail of basically any kind that you want. And so these high-end restaurants that have an owner and they're one-off, I mean, those guys, they make money and they know what they're doing. Now, where the challenge comes is when you take that and you're able to grow and expand into other markets. And that's what this young man, Thomas in San Antonio, is dealing with. He's got a small restaurant, got a good base of customers. He's profitable. And here's the thing, do you franchise or do you go own it and open another one? Personally, myself, I would own it myself and make sure it was right. I wouldn't just franchise anything right out of the chute. Not many people want to buy a franchise from somebody that's only got one restaurant. You're going to have to show that you can operate 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of them yourself before you start selling franchises or licenses for people to repeat whatever it is that you've got. But you got to work through, Thomas, have to work through, how do you differentiate yourself from other restaurants? And you know what they say? They say you got to have at least one thing that is 10 times better than any of your competitors if you're going to be successful. Now, you can have other things that are better, but you got to have one something that is 10 times better than anything anybody else has got if you want to grow that business and be successful. And that's something that you just have to do. And so when you go out and you are expanding, there's got to be a reason why people want to come to your restaurant. And number one, service is everything. Customer service, you got to have that. Number two, quality of the food. But if you've got something that is unique, something really special, that's just fantastic. Okay, so here's where we are. We're looking at, Thomas here from San Antonio. And Thomas, I would say look at what you've got and think real hard about whether or not this is something that will work in other areas, other cities, other locations within a city. You live in a big city, San Antonio, you could have 10 of these, and in a big city like that, which is the good news, by the way, is that you could have multiple locations in a city as big as San Antonio or Houston or Atlanta or Dallas. These are big cities, and you can have multiple locations. So I would study it real hard. I would make sure, number one, that I have the cash to do it. You don't want to go out and open a restaurant and underfund it. You want to make sure that it's high quality, that you have the cash to do it. Now, I'm going to talk in a little bit about some of the reasons that you want to be very careful, why restaurants fail, why businesses fail, and some of the things you want to make sure you do. So let me move on to the next question. I'll come back to that. Jerry from Mobile says, my son has a great business idea, but I'm worried that he is going to quit a good job and then lose everything if he doesn't make it. And then he wants to know if I have any advice. Well, yeah, you want to make sure that ask your son all the questions. There are a lot of questions you're going to want to ask your son. First, what is the market demand? What is the cash need for his business? And what are the economics for his business? And does he have a team of people? What is it going to take to open this up and build it? These are things you got to ask these questions. So, yes, I would ask your son, Jerry, a lot of tough questions about his business, and I would make sure that he had a solid plan. I'd do at least 3 years of numbers, projections, probably 5, and talk about how he's going to build it, how he's going to scale it. What is the runway for the cash that he's that he's going to take in? That's always important. How's he going to acquire customers? Who are his customers? Take a look at what it is he's going to offer, who would want to buy it, and how many people would want to buy it, and how big can it be, and what is the real market size for that business. So if I was you, my son's wanting to start up a business, I'd ask him all those questions, and I'd help him put it together. And then at some point, you're going to see whether or not there's a real opportunity there. And also, I'd talk to him about, is he the entrepreneur? Is he the visionary? Is he going to run it? Does he have the skill set to do that? And, I've gone over and talked about many times the characteristics of an entrepreneur, and I'd walk my son through that. Does he have this? Is he willing to to do this and do that? Can he carry the load? And there are a lot of questions, and we've been through those characteristics, and I certainly would have sit him down and go back and ask him all the right questions. Next question, Robert from Houston. He says, I've been working for this large company in Houston for almost 5 years now, and I'm stagnant watching others get promoted into higher paying jobs. I am 30 years old, and I want more for my family. It's a good company, but I need a promotion. He says, coach me, coach, on how to get a better position in the game. Well, let me tell you what. Okay, you want to be recognized in that company, you want to get promotions, then you need to be out there making it happen every day. Whatever the goals are of that company, you need to be a star. Yes, you need to be running the touchdowns. You need to be making as many plays as you can to put points on the board. And you'll be recognized when you do that. That's how you climb ladders. You climb it through success and being successful. You know what I used to tell people? If you want to grow, you want to be successful in a company, be the first one there every morning, be the last one to leave every day. I gotta say this. Back when I was working for LifeMark Corporation, I remember the president of the company stopped by my office one morning early. He said, "You're always here before me every morning." And he said, "And you're always still in your office working when I go home." And I said, "Yeah, because I want to make sure that I do the best job that I can. And I want you to know I got all the promotions. I was promoted and promoted and promoted over everyone. People who went there that had even more education than I did, and they were unable to get the promotions that I got and the bonuses and the salaries that all the benefits that I got because I outworked the other people. I found out that my boss came in at 7:15 every morning, and that he would leave about 5:30. So I was there by 7, and I never left till after he left. And so what I'm saying to you is you need to do the same thing. Find out when your boss is going to be there. Make sure you're always there early. Make sure you're doing everything that he expects you to do, and then outwork him. And the other thing, too, is if there's somebody, I would be in meetings. I found myself in meetings as a young guy, and they would say, we need somebody to go to Arkansas. We got an account that's going under up there, and we need to get it turned around. And I'd say, I'll take it. Let me do that. And I would take that. And people's like, why does he want to go there? I mean, my gosh, that's a bad area. That's not a good account. And I'd say, I'll handle it. Let me take it. And I'd get on a plane, and I'd fly, and I'd go up to Arkansas and to wherever it was. And I'd work that little account until I got it turned around, and I'd come back. And the next Monday, when I'm sitting in the Monday morning meeting with the leadership of the company, they'd say, how'd that go, Scrushy? And I'd say, we got it. They re-signed. We got it. No problem. The guy's happy. Matter of fact, he's going to come visit us down here in the corporate headquarters in a couple of months, but everything's working just fine. And what I didn't tell him was that I had to go fishing on Saturday with him down on the Arkansas River. But that's what I did. So you do whatever you got to do to get your customer to stay with you and to re-sign and to grow and to build the business. So I did things like that all the time. So if you want to grow and climb the ladder in that business, then you need to be a ladder climber. And you do that by success, by outperforming other people. Matter of fact, I even had people that didn't like me because they'd say, Scrushy, why are you working so hard? Why did you go do this and do that? And I said, because I'm helping to build this company, because I've got a plan. I want to be successful in my life. And so I worked very, very hard. I'd outwork everybody around me. And some people get jealous of that. They just don't like it. But that's what it takes. But my seniority, my seniors that were over me, the leadership of the company, they saw that, and they rewarded me for the hard work and the success. Next question, Jessica from Tampa. She says, you've talked a lot about characteristics of entrepreneurs. I think I have some of them, and I know that I have the desire to own my own business, but how do I know if I do have those characteristics if I've never gone out on my own, started a business? Well, Jessica from Tampa, I think that, you need to think about how you feel about taking on the risk. When somebody's wondering whether or not they're an entrepreneur, do you lay awake at night dreaming about building the business? Do you think about it all the time? Is it something that you can visualize it and you can see the profitability of it? You can feel that this is what you need to be doing, and you're just determined that this is my life. I can go make this successful. And you see all of the ramifications. You see how it could fail. You see how it could win. And if you really can get that sized up in your mind, and you have a heavy weight on you that's pushing you to go do it, and you're willing to take that risk, and you're willing to go out and really work hard to make it happen, but to make sure you got the finances, triple and double check the product, the service, to make sure that everything that you're doing is sellable and that there are customers that would have an interest in it. And we're going to talk about that in a moment, about some of the things that you really need to be focused on when you're building a business to prevent you from failing. But, Jessica, I think that if you've got the desire and you've got the dream and you feel it in your bones that, hey, I want to go make this happen, I can do this, there's probably a high chance that you can. Keep in mind one thing, that a real entrepreneur doesn't have a fear. It doesn't have a fear of doing it. It doesn't have a fear of losing money. It doesn't have a fear of failure. You don't. And you study it, you understand it, and you already know that you can go make it happen, and you sense it, and it's a feeling. It's not only just a feeling, but it's a mental thing. You've got it, and it keeps you awake at night. Those are the things. If that's happened to you, and you're having those dreams and whatnot, yeah, you're probably an entrepreneur. You probably can go out and make it happen. But do check the numbers, run all the math, do all the math check everything out, make sure that everything you're doing is viable and that it can, and that it does work. You want to make sure of that. So let me just do a quick review. Good questions. We'll have more next week. We talked about things that immediately impress investors. I want to run through them real quick, okay? When you're talking to an investor, you want to give them the problem before you give them the product. This is the problem, and here we have a solution. So being able to say we're solving a very specific problem, and here's what is going on, and here's how we're solving it. They love that. And then also say that, here's our customer that is willing to pay for this, because they like to know that there is a paying customer. And then you might want to say customers are already paying for this, but we have a better one. And then you may want to even say, that our unit economics are very strong. And let me go over those economics with you. And then we talk about not running from any risk. If you have 2 or 3 risks, say, here are our biggest risks. Here's what they are. And here's how we're going to mitigate those risks. Actually have that conversation with them and talk through that. And then you may want to say something like, our competitors are doing X and we're going to do Y. Here's what they're doing. Here's what we're doing. And this is why ours is better than that one, because they need to understand that. And you can explain that as well. That's always a good thing. And then you can say that we're raising this capital to accelerate what is already working and which we already know can work and has worked and can be successful. And that's why we're raising the money, okay? And then you may want to say something about your team. Our team has direct experience in this problem, very successful. Now, here are a few mistakes that you don't want to make. Again, you don't want to talk too long without a clear point. That's always a problem. Again, you don't want to start with the problem. The product. You want to start with the problem. And then you give them a solution. You talk about the market, and you talk about how you're going to get traction, and what is the business model. These are things that are very important. Now, the biggest things that investors really are looking to check out is, number one, credibility with what you're saying, okay? Clarity of your vision is important. Relentless execution and determination, to go out and really be successful at what you're doing. So there's several things that we want to be careful about. And number one, we want to make sure that we have the cash. And, we talked about the runway. How much, when we talk about cash and the runway, we talk about how long is the runway? I'm a pilot, so I think about runway. We know that every airplane, based on the fuel load and the weight and the weather, the temperature, they have a certain runway before, and they have to be up in the air and flying before the end of that runway, right? And you got to be up in the air and flying with your business before you get to the end of the runway, whatever that runway is, and that's going to be driven by the cash and your cash burn, how much cash you're going to need. So you want to validate that. You have to know that. You have to understand the market need, and you want to validate the market need. The business model and all the unit economics, you got to have all that together and organized. You got to have your pricing strategy. You need to understand that. You got to have your team. And if there's other co-founders, y'all got to have your dynamics together, and you have to have agreements as to who owns what and who's going to be the decision makers over different areas, who's going to call the shots. A lot of companies get into trouble where they have multiple co-founders and nobody knows who's in charge. Make sure you have that already determined. And of course, all your marketing, all your distribution, everything has to be understood and well defined in order for you to go out and really make something happen. And then when you scale, you want to scale with discipline. So you want to make sure that everything fits, and you don't do something that you shouldn't be doing too early. So making some mistakes early on could cost you a lot of money. And so you want to really have your act together there. So got to know your exact runway. You need to know it in a number of months, and you need to understand that burn rate. You want to make sure that your burn rate is not increasing faster than your revenue growth. Think about that. So if you're spending, let's say, $50,000 a month to run this, and your revenue, and that grows every month, say by 10%, but your revenue is only growing by 3%. You don't want your burn rate to outgrow your actual revenue growth. So you got to measure that, and you got to make sure that all of that is in line with where it needs to be. When we talk about a market, just for your own benefit, when and this goes back to even some of the questions I had, from Jessica and maybe even from Jerry from Mobile for his son, and Thomas and San Antonio, and whatnot. You want to ask the question, name 10 people who desperately want your product and would use your product. Just name 10. Before we invest millions of dollars, and wouldn't that be a great question from venture capitalists? Give me 10 customers. Name 10 customers that want your product desperately, meaning they really can't live without it, before we invest millions of dollars. So if you're going to build something that's going to really be successful, you got to know that you got people that want the product, right? So that's not a bad thing, is to go ahead and validate that. Measure people's willingness to pay for your product, and what will they pay for it. These are things that you need to think through, and you need to be able to have a real handle on that. And I said earlier that you really ought to have something in your business that's 10 times better than what anybody else has. It's good to be 10% better. But being 10 times better for something will drive business to you. You think about restaurants that you go to. My wife and I have a favorite restaurant. It's an Italian restaurant, and they have something that we like a lot. And, they have other things that are okay, but we go there for that one thing because it's 10 times better than what any of the other restaurants have. And that one thing brings us back every single time. Now, it might not be the one thing that you would like, but it's the one thing that my wife and I like. Now, they have a lot of great things on the menu, but that's what keeps bringing us back. So there's it differentiates that restaurant from others for us, and we make a decision to actually go there. So that's important. So when you start looking at cost, okay, you got to look at lifetime value of a customer. Lifetime value. When you acquire a customer, what is the lifetime value? Is that a year? Is it a one-off? Is it repeat business for 5 years? And once you get them, how long? And then you got to look at your cost of acquisition of that customer, what we call CAC. We call the long-term the value of that customer LTV. So we got to look at a CAC, a customer acquisition cost, and long-term value. There's a ratio. Okay, right here, there's a ratio. There's a cost, and there's a ratio. So let's say it costs $1,000 to get that marketing, to get that patient, get that customer in, $1,000. But yet you got a lifetime of $50,000 over a period of 5 years that customer is going to spend money with you. And that's so your ratio then would be 1 to 50, but it could be 1 to 2. But if it's 1 to 1, you ain't got anything. That's zero. You got zero profitability. If it's 1 to 2. It depends on how much that one cost, and the 2, then that's that. But if it starts getting out there, 1.3 gets better, 1.4. If it's 1.5, you're really looking good. And by the time you get to 1.10, you're just a home run, right? So that's important. And those are the things we got to focus on. So you got to look at that cost of acquiring a customer, the CAC, and you got to look at the LTV, the lifetime value of your customer. And so that's a ratio that's going to drive the success of your business. So you need to know your unit economics. You got to understand it. Your revenue cannot grow less than your cost, or so the revenue's got to grow faster than your cost is climbing, and you don't want it to cross like that, and your costs be higher. That'll put you out of business. So, and you need to understand, what is the scale for break even? How are you going to scale this? How big can you build this, and where are you really headed with it? And so, we got to talk about price sensitivity. Charging too little or too much, somewhere in there, there's a perfect price for whatever your product is. And there are a couple of measurements. There's the Van Westendorp method, which is one way they ask, about 4 questions you got to go through in using that to determine price. Number one is, how do we determine, is it too low? Because see, if it's too low, at what point do people perceive, it's not quality? It's low quality. There's a price where people say, well, that's too cheap. And you'll see things in the store. You'll walk through and you say, well, no, if that's only cost $5 and this one over here is $15, this one's got to be better than that one, and I can afford $15. Now, I want you to listen to what I said. That was $5, and it looked too cheap, so I didn't buy that. This one's $15. I can afford that. Now, they got one over here that's $45. That's too high, and I don't perceive that I need to spend that much. So now we've just answered 3 questions. Number one, is the price so low that you perceive that it's not quality? Number two, you perceive that is a good price, the $15, and it'll get you what you want. And then the three, the 45 was too high. So somewhere in there, and then there's another price which might be 20. So you might say, well, wait a minute. Now I can pay 20. 15 was good. 5 looks too low. 45 is way too high, and I'll pay 20. Well, you got to find out your product, whatever it is you're selling or your service. Where is it in that? There's another gauge that is called the Gaber-Granger survey, and that finds the price that where people will most likely pay for your product. So that's a survey that you can try. You can look that up on the internet and figure out what that is. The Gaber-Granger, and that's another way to determine, if is it too high, is it too low? Where in here will people pay for what I have? And so there's a test that you can run, and that's a very successful way to get your hands on, how do I go about pricing this? Now let's just go back to co-founders just real quick. If you're going to have a partner, y'all need to have a real hard conversation about equity and the business, what each one's roles are, and you also want to talk about exit scenarios so that there's an understanding amongst the the founders of the company as to how we're going to exit this business and this business. Also, you want to take a look at skill gaps where in your company. You know that in building a company, you got to have certain things. You got a financial person, you got maybe an HR, you got to have an operations person, you got to have salespeople, and these are just some of the simple ones, right? So do you have all that? Are there any gaps in the skill set in your company? And how are we going to go about hiring people to make sure that we cover all of those things without hiring too many people? Because hiring for just headcount is wrong. Hiring for specific capabilities is the right way to go about it. You never want to hire just to hire people. You want to hire to fill needed skill sets, and you want to fill in the gaps. And so you want to make sure that you don't hire too many people too soon. I looked at a company just recently. You won't believe this. The company went public at about $1.5 billion market cap. The CEO of the company hired like several hundred people. He built this huge headquarters, way overbuilt it, spent a couple $100 million building out all of that. He'd raised, I think, around $900 million, and he blew through the whole $900 million, blew through every bit of it. And now the company has from a market cap of $1.5 billion, I think they're $30 or $40 million, and now the company's for sale. And he just blew all the money, and they raised all that money, had that huge market cap, and I think the company's probably doing $20-25 million a year in revenue, which is a pretty good little revenue stream. But everybody that bought in on that public offering that was $1.5 billion in market value now has no value, and the company can probably be bought for less than $30 or $40 million. So he blew through it. So you got to be careful, and I guess he thought he was going to control the world or whatever. But the bottom line is that doesn't work. You got to be careful now. If you're going to raise that much money and the market's willing to pay that much, you better have a good plan, and you better execute that plan. And you don't need to be running through that money. You need to, maybe some of the things he needed, but obviously he didn't need that much because it didn't give him a return. So if you're going to spend the money, you got to spend it because you're going to get a return on it. And if you don't get a return on it, and what's a minimum return? I wouldn't touch it unless I was getting 20%. Everything that I invested money in when I was building my companies, I look for a minimum of 20% return. If I don't have a 20% return, I don't put the money in there. I want a 20% return on all of my investments with my company's money. So same thing in a restaurant. If I'm going to buy some big piece of restaurant equipment, I want to make sure that there's going to be a return on that. What am I going to get for that? Is that going to help me make more money, or is it just going to be a big piece of equipment sitting there and doing nothing? So if I'm going to get a new refrigerator, an expanded refrigerator, take more cooling on, I need to make sure I'm moving more product. It's going to help me move product. If I'm not moving the product, I don't need that big refrigerator. Keep the little one that I got now. So you got to have a return. So, you want to make sure that whatever your product is that you're building or whatever you're doing, you got to make sure that there are customers out there that are actively looking for your product as a solution to whatever they need, whatever their problem is. Just like, when they're companies that are successful are solving problems and providing solutions that are needed, and those companies tend to do quite well. It's the ones that we think that this is something that's needed, but we didn't test it and we didn't find out are there enough customers that will buy it. You got to make sure that there is a customer funnel, and we call it a customer acquisition funnel. So, we're spending money over here, our CAC, we're spending money over here to get these customers, and when we get the customer, is the money we spent to get the customer, is the customer going to buy enough to justify what we spent to get them? So we got to look at that, but we also need to make sure that we structure, that we have a product that will attract customers and their solutions. So, what are you going to spend? What's the ROI on the investments? And you that has to be measurable, and you have to measure that. You have to plan on that. So again, another way to look at it is, what is my cost per lead to get a customer in? We used to do that all the time. And one of the businesses I was in, we'd say, what does it cost to get one customer in? What are we spending per customer? And then what are they going to buy? And how does that work? So, when you start doing advertising, you really have to think through that. What is the return on spending that money, placing that ad, putting up that billboard, running that magazine ad, doing whatever. It has to be some way that you can wrap your arms around it. So, wow, lots to talk about. You have to have a clear product to market plan, and you need to understand the metrics surrounding that, the cost of that. Is this an organic growth, or how is this going to grow? How are we going to make this happen? How many people are we going to have to hire to make the product, to sell the product, what is all this? Wrap your arms around all of that. So we want to make sure that this is something that it's just kind of way to look at this, is the pain of not hiring the additional people, okay? But in other words, everybody's working hard, you don't have enough people. Is that pain of not hiring them, does it outweigh, let's say, what would happen if we did hire, the cost of hiring the additional people? Which one is going to hurt worse, the cost of hiring the additional people, or the fact that we don't have them and we're having to work, much harder? Now, you got that in all companies that are fast growth companies. You're going to hit that wall somewhere, and you're going to say, man, we got to have 3 or 4 more people. And then you got to say, well, now, wait a minute, those 3 or 4 people, that's, is that going to cost me another $100,000 a month? Is that going to cost me $50,000 a month? What's that going to cost me? And what is my revenue? And is it going to pay for itself? And am I really going to get the return? So that's all about properly balancing your scaling and making sure that you're doing it in a timely fashion. So you don't want to outscale. You want to make sure you scale in a reasonable way so that you can continue to grow the business with a trajectory that makes sense. So keeping your infrastructure lean makes sense. Being very careful, optimize your current load of business with the people that you have. And then when you feel like you get 3 months, maybe hold on another 3 months before you go out and hire those other people and see how it goes. You don't go too long because you don't want to break the back and you don't want to produce a quality product. So there's a balancing there, and you have to really be careful as you balance it to make sure that you don't get yourself in a bind and start producing a lower quality product. So again, here they are. Here's the points: the cash, the length of the runway. We talked about that. Making sure you understand the size of your market and who your customers really are, who your competition is, and what are they doing, and what can we do that's 10 times better than anything they do, because that's where you're going to get your customer. Understand the economics, your LTV and your CAC ratio. You want to make sure that lifetime value of those customers and the cost of acquiring those customers make sense. In other words, that customer has to be worth more than what you spent to get him, right? And what is the multiple on that? You need to understand that. Make sure there's no unresolved co-founder issues. You want to work through all those. things like that that can get you into a lot of trouble. Have you had any customer complaints you want to make, and have we resolved any of that? We don't want to have anybody out there bad mouthing us while we're trying to get started up, right? It could hurt us a lot. We want to make sure that does not happen. So let's just run through a few things that have caused startup companies to fail. Number one, no real market demand for the product. Big problem. Running out of cash early. Big problem. Don't want to make that happen. Weak unit economics. That's a problem. Wrong team. Internal conflict with your people. Not good. Poor product market fit. Whatever you're making, whatever you're selling, doesn't work. And I know that story. You got to be careful. You don't want to put a pizza restaurant in the wrong place. You want to put it in a place where people eat pizzas. And I'm using that as an example. And we found that in one of our pizza locations, that we put it into a market where the people did not eat pork. And that was a real problem because you got a lot of pork, that goes on pizza. And people won't come in the restaurant if you have pork in your restaurant. So we found that out. So that was a real lesson. So you got to make sure the culture that you're going into makes sense for whatever it is your product is, okay? You don't want to have an ineffective go-to-market strategy. You want to have a solid product. You want to make sure that you fully understand everything and that your messaging of whatever it is that you're doing is solid. You don't want to get out-competed, and businesses fail because of that. Competitors can move quicker, and they've got the customers, and they just beat the pants off of you for whatever the reason is, whether it be quality, whether it be your your production schedule. It might be your marketing. I don't know, but whatever it is. So, and then sometimes people start up businesses and they're wealthy people and they're doing other things, so they have a lack of focus on the business and they just kind of let it kind of do its own thing, and it doesn't do well. So you really got to focus. You want to make sure that you're not doing too much. Some businesses, you'll go in and they'll be doing this and this and this and this and this, 3 or 4 different things, 5 things, 6 things. And that lack of focus on the one thing that they really need to be doing. And I've seen venture capitalists so many times say, look, I just want you to be doing one thing real good. And I'm not interested in investing in a company that's scattered. And I want to see you focused. Regulatory and legal issues cause problems. And then, of course, founder burnout. That's one of the ones. Poor leadership. I've seen that happen. I'm just tired. I just want to sell the company. Well, you've only been doing it for 2.5 years. You already want to sell it. You never even built it. It's still not even successful. It's not making money, and we're already trying to sell it. So these are things. So when you get down to it, 2 really key reasons that root problems that businesses fail, and that's number 1, not really truly understanding your customer, and number 2, not managing the cash and not executing appropriately, or having a discipline problem with the way that you've executed. So these are things that are important and we all need to be focused on. So good show today. Let me just talk real quick about Brothers Cleaner, multi-purpose cleaner. I tell you that this cleaner, we use it, our family, and I know many, many other people that are using it. If you don't have this, you're missing something. You can go to brotherscleaner.com and you can order this, and I promise you that you will be happy with it. This is a great cleaner. We use it for all kind of different things. Just real quick, carpet, floors, furniture, windows, countertops, fabrics, cloth, linen, plastics, leather, stainless steel, glass, wood, marble, granite, vehicles, boats, RVs, interior, exterior of everything. It's not much it won't clean. It's safe on your granite, safe on your marble. And once you start using this, you're going to want to have one of these in every room in your house. So if there's a spill or there's a problem, or you have animals and you got a problem with them, you got something to clean up everything that happens. So this is a great product. You can only get it at brotherscleaner.com. All right. Good show. Appreciate everybody coming in today, dialing in and watching our show. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. We'd love for you to be a subscriber and just come back every week. We're going to keep talking about fun things and building businesses, and we got a lot more to do, a lot more to talk about. If you have a guest or someone that you know that would like to be on our show, you can go to info@scrushyonbusiness.com and just let us know, and we'll be more than happy to see if we can accommodate them. But you have a blessed day today, and thank you for viewing today.